Okay. I'm going to share with you some points and some texts, and I think you'll see my screen now, and now you'll see the text. I put a link to this text in the WhatsApp. You don't have to use it because I'm sharing the screen, so you can choose either just to watch my screen or to call it up on your own computer. I want to start with a connection and then with some positive points and then get into the guts of the matter of Messianism in Chabad. The connection is to the previous topic. We did religious Zionism. And when we did religious Zionism, there is something so obvious and so bold and so unusual, and it should have been so striking, and not a single person, including myself, pointed this out about religious Zionism. How does religious Zionism differ drastically from all of the previous messiahs that we saw from the beginning of this course? Who can put their finger on it?
I can't think of a single person that it is centered around.
It's a place rather than a person.
It's a mass movement. They are mass movements, right?
Mashiach is a place.
That lacks and seemingly even has no interest in a messianic figure. I'm not aware of anywhere in religious Zionism, not now and not for the past more than a century, right? That this idea that, the redemption is come and we're going to the land of Israel, that that somebody's pointed to somebody and say, yes, and here's the Messiah. It's a messianic movement that lacks a messianic figure. And we saw no example of that in the examples that we did from the beginning of this course, straight from Jesus of Nazareth, right? And down to Shabtai Tzvi and Jacob Frank. There's always a messianic figure. And in this one, you have a fervent movement with no figure whatsoever. Yeah.
No figure whatsoever?
No messianic figure.
I mean, generally by the movement itself when Chabad was formed, correct?
No. I'm not talking about Chabad yet.
Oh, okay.
Our previous topic of religious Zionism.
Oh, yes.
You have this fervent movement, which, you can have there's a lot of different attitudes towards this movement, but it's fervent and it's real and it's never come around to pointing at a specific messianic figure. Now contrast that to whatever you know about Chabad. What do you think, people?
Well, Chabad had Chabad from the start. Chabad from the start had a figure. Chabad started with one particular figure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
With Rabbi, or what was his name? The one that wrote the Tanya.
Baal Shem Tov.
No. Baal Shem Tov did not write the Tanya. The Tanya.
The Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya.
That's right. But he has a name. What's his name?
Rabbi Schneersohn.
Rabbi Schneersohn. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rabbi Schneersohn. So
you're saying he was a messianic figure from the beginning?
No.
Yeah. Yes.
No, he was simply an exalted rabbi who taught. And so was every generation until the last one who not originally, but later in his life got pinned up as
No,
Moshiach.
I think it's wrong. I think that he actually was a messianic figure because, but not in a regular way. He was a messianic figure for to bring Jews back to Judaism.
Okay, all right.
And to have a specific look at, I mean, the Tanya itself is, I think, is a messianic writing.
Okay, all right. I think it's very important to take what Hannah says into account, because we mostly came here tonight to talk about the seventh and so far the final Rebbe of Chabad, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneersohn. But Hannah is saying that the roots of Chabad Messianism are from before him. Okay, and we're going to see actually in text tonight that is correct. Okay, that whatever Messianism we can talk about regarding this seventh Rebbe, okay, he saw himself nevertheless as a representative or in the shoes of the Rebbes that came before him. So that's an important point. But it's also, because we're just starting at this moment, very important to realize something basic. And I think it comes out of the comparison with religious Zionism. In religious Zionism, you have a messianic movement that lacks, or if at least is without, a messianic figure. In Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneersohn's lifetime, you also have something unusual. Okay, it applies less to the last part of his life, but for most of his life, he was also extremely unusual. Why? You had a messianic figure who did not proclaim any kind of messianic movement openly. Okay, the
He
previous
himself never
thought,
did he?
What?
He himself never did he? It was his
I
followers who did.
I didn't. The details are important. I didn't say that he never did. I said it was like.
That's what I'm asking.
I said it was like this for most of his lifetime.
Okay, so he did himself say it later?
Not necessarily including the last few years.
But he
Okay,
never denied it either.
Never denied it either. But you have a messianic figure who in his prime, okay, is not proclaiming himself the Messiah. This is not Shabtai Tzvi who's going around the world and proclaiming himself the Messiah. This is not even Jesus of Nazareth saying that the kingdom of heaven, is here and I am the Son. Okay, at least as he's represented in the New Testament. This rather, okay, is someone who creates and builds a messianic fervor, and the fervor arises around him. But at least in his prime, he never says it's me. And in fact, in his prime, he did the opposite, okay? He would deny it. He would confront it. He would be angry at it. He would write letters telling people stop writing that or stop saying that. Okay, and though it's like the left hand and the right hand. The right hand is promoting messianic fervor, and the left hand is saying no. At least in his prime again, don't say it about me. Now, there's a lot to say about Chabad. And I'm not talking about Chabad in general. I'm not talking about the 7 generations, the whole history of almost 2 centuries that Chana brought up. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking just about the final Rebbe. Okay, and there's a lot to say about Chabad that has to do with the Messianism, but isn't Messianism directly. Now, everyone here, I'm sure, I can't imagine there's any exception, has opinions on Chabad, has experiences with Chabad, I mean, personal experiences, has attitudes towards Chabad, okay? Some of you may have, what's the word, may have conflicted attitudes towards Chabad. I personally do. I'm going to say this straight out at the beginning, because, first of all, because I remember there was an earlier class where I made jokes about Chabad. And then I realized, wait a minute, all this is being recorded and put on the internet. And I'm going to come out like this, this anti-Chabad guy. And I'm totally not. Okay. I'm also not a totally, I'm Chabad either. There's so many aspects to this that need to be taken into account in order to get a.
So you'll be politically correct, is that right?
I don't think I'm being politically correct at all. No, I think to show at least aspects of all of the different sides that there are as best I can. And I'll tell you first of all about the one time when I met the Rebbe. Before I tell you that, did anybody here ever meet the Rebbe? Okay, I did. I can't say that
I lived in his neighborhood a few streets away, but I never met him.
You never met him. Okay, so you lived in Crown Heights. Wow.
I lived in the next neighborhood over.
Ah, you lived next door to the Holy of Holies. Well, I had never been there in my life. When I grew up in Connecticut, which isn't too far from New York, but for my family, New York was like the planet Mars, okay? It was like a different country. It wasn't the United States of America. And rarely went to New York. Even when I did go to New York for university, I never had anything to do with Chabad in New York. But I was home one weekend from school, and we went to the local Chabad house, and there were a few of us yeshiva students from New York, and the rabbi at the Chabad house said, "Look, if any of you want a free ride to New York tomorrow, I'll give you a ride back. I'll take you Sunday morning early. You'll get a free ride to New York. You'll get dollars from the Rebbe, and then you can go wherever you're going." So I said, what the heck? I had never done this before. I got in the car, okay? And what I saw, maybe Elisheva saw this if she lived nearby from the outside, okay, is that there's a line to get dollars from the Rebbe. This, I believe, was probably around 1986, 1987, something like that. Boy, was there a line. The line went for blocks, right? From the entrance to that building, 770 Eastern Parkway, for several city blocks, people waiting outside. So we're all waiting outside, and interesting things start to happen. The first thing that happens is that a Chabad mitzvah mobile, a Chabad, tank, right? Chabad is like an army. It has a uniform. It has a youth group called Tzivot Hashem, the army of the Lord, right? So it's an army. It has a flag. It also has tanks, right? So this tank, this mitzvah tank, wants to entertain the people who are waiting to get dollars from the Rebbe, and it starts blasting Hasidic music. Okay, so we're standing online. It's hard to talk because of the Hasidic music, but it's entertaining. Then a war breaks out. Somebody attacks the tank. Okay, how do you attack a Chabad tank? I guess I think it's Latinos who live in the neighborhood. And somebody on one of the buildings next to this big line took this giant loudspeaker to the top of the building, okay, and started blasting rap music to drown out the Hasidic music. It was a music war. All right. Eventually, despite all of this noise, the line eventually moves. And what the line does is It goes into this building, 770 Eastern Parkway. It goes into the building and down a hall and up a hall and down a staircase and over a staircase. I don't remember, but the line continues within the building. And finally, you get within a distance where you can actually see the Rebbe at a table, okay? He's sitting at the table, and there's a pile of dollar bills on the table. And there's a man sitting next to him who's helping him. What is he helping the Rebbe do? Well, there's this pile of dollar bills, and he gives each person $2 bills. And for that, he needs an assistant, because for each person, he takes $2, the assistant takes $2 bills, puts them in a paper clip, and hands them to the Rebbe. That's his job, the paper clip. Okay, so he hands the dollar bills to the Rebbe, and then the Rebbe gives the dollar bills to each person. I had heard all kinds of stories about how when you go to get dollars from the Rebbe, even though you've never met him before, he knows who you are, and he tells you something, relevant to your personal life, and gives you advice and what have you. I'm not denying those stories, because I have neither any evidence nor any stock in proving or denying them. But this was during the later years of the Rebbe's life. It's possible that he had less charisma. It's possible that he had less insight at that point. It wasn't as well. And basically what it was is you walked over to the Rebbe, he gave you $2 in a paper clip, and he said, "Bruche v'atzloche," right? Blessing and success. And that's what it was. It took a couple of seconds. And I was a little bit disappointed, like, something, some special blessing or some special insight, but it didn't happen. But I got the $2 from the Rebbe, and I said to myself, okay, a blessing of success from the Lubavitcher Rebbe is a nice thing. And I took the $2 home. You're supposed to give it to tzedakah, but the Chabadniks, they don't give the $2 to tzedakah. They give $2 other to charity or more, and they keep the special $2 that the Rebbe gave them. So at home, I had a special safe with all my special things with a combination code. I put the $2 from the Rebbe in it and saved them until my family moved and the box got lost. So I don't have them anymore. That was my encounter with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. At the same time, I guess that I have benefited and my family has benefited and people I know have benefited from Chabad in so many ways that it's impossible to describe. And at the very same time, once again, there's things about Chabad that always bothered me very deeply. The main one being the uniforms and the military language. No, I don't mean the name, the Army of the Lord. I mean like just like in the army, you have army language. So in Chabad, you have Chabad language. Just like in the army, you have uniforms. So in Chabad, you have uniforms. And just like in the army, you're supposed to think in a certain kind of army way. So everybody in Chabad is supposed to think in a certain kind of Chabad way. And that always bothered me a lot. And I always wondered why the Rebbe didn't understand that, right? You see someone who's an extremely successful and insightful and charismatic leader, someone who has insight. So why not have the insight that all of this, think-alike stuff is also harmful and may keep some people away from Chabad? That always bothered me until I got my answer from Shlomo Riskin. And I want to play to you a clip. It's only 2 minutes of Shlomo Riskin with the thing that I personally find the most positive about Chabad. The link is here inside of the document. I'll click it and it should open. Okay. It's opening. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nihya b'baruch. Here is Rabbi Shlomo Riskin, somebody that I have been quite inspired by. And he was important people. Among them, the Lubavitcher, one second, hold on. Among them, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Shlomo Riskin used to say that in his generation, meaning the 70s in the United States, so there were three great traditional leaders. There was the teacher of the generation, that was Rabbi Soloveitchik. There was the posek, the halachic decisor of the generation, that was Rav Moshe Feinstein. And there was the Rebbe of the generation, that was the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He had a relationship with all three. And in this 2-minute clip, he even refers to how his relationship differed between them. So here's the clip about the way that Shlomo Riskin is a Chabadnik.
I asked for a bracha for a friend. None of my other teachers were very supportive of my going to Israel.
Can't hear it.
You can't hear it? I'll make it.
The sound is not at all clear.
Very bad.
Really? 'Cause I hear it loud and clear.
Lomo Riskin. Turn my volume up and I can't hear it.
Let me see if my volume is full. Hold on.
Shlomo Riskin was the scholar in residence on a cruise I took, and he was great.
Okay, my sound setting is full. I wonder why you're not hearing it well. Let's give it another second. He's talking about when he decided to move from Israel. He said that his other teachers discouraged him. That's maybe background to understanding this.
Avi,
Rabbi Soloveitchik,
Avi, within the share screen, I think there's a setting for the sound. I can't do it because I don't have the share screen on, but look into the share screen and see if there's
There's a little speaker lower left in this frame.
Yes.
I have to stop the.
No, you don't.
within the share screen.
No, within Zoom, right?
No, within the share screen. You have to bring up the share screen, and then there's some kind of setting within share screen to the sound.
On the lower left of the screen, right under where you move the thing back and forth, is a little loudspeaker. Click that, it should give you a volume adjustment. That's it.
I don't see any speaker.
Yeah, no, you just touched it and moved away.
You just clicked it and there it is, right there.
It's on maximum.
It's on full. Give it another try, see what happens.
There it goes.
I asked for a bracha for a friend. None of my other teachers were very supportive of my going to Israel. The Rebbe was exceeding.
Can you hear?
The Rebbe said,
Other people, mute yourselves.
"Yatzliach evrachecha, God will prosper your ways. V'ya'arich mamlachtecha ve'efrat ad biyat hagoel." The Rebbe sometimes spoke in superlatives. Would prolong your majesty in Efrat until the coming of the Messiah. But you must create shluchim who go all over the world, who are modern on the outside and yearning Jewish souls who want so desperately to come home. I'm exceedingly grateful that I had the very good fortune to have known such a giant during my most formative years and to have benefited by his amazing teachings. Yehי zichro baruch b'omei olamim.
Okay, were you able to hear some of it?
Yeah, some of it.
Yeah.
Louder.
The last few words.
He speaks very softly, so that might be part of the problem. There's a few things. It's only 2 minutes, and it's kind of it seems kind of simple, but there's actually a few things to unpack here. Okay, first of all, he says that when he wanted to come to Israel, some of his teachers didn't support him. That was Rabbi Soloveitchik. Rabbi Soloveitchik said, Riskin, if you go to Israel, they're going to eat you alive. Okay, meaning that the political world and the rabbinic world would have a hard time digesting somebody like Rabbi Shlomo Riskin, and that was probably true. and yet, there was also a good that came out of it. To the contrary, he said, when he had a positive idea, meaning to go to Israel and establish Efrat, the Lubavitcher Rebbe encouraged him, okay, and he proclaimed that he would rule over Efrat, like be the king of Efrat, until the coming of the Messianic Redeemer. Okay, I hope some of you heard that part and maybe even thought about it for a second. Rabbi Riskin said, he kind of pushed it aside. He said, the Rebbe liked to talk in superlatives. He liked to exaggerate things. What does that mean? I'm going to rule over Efrat until the coming of the Redeemer. But you can imagine how a Chabadnik might hear that. A regular Chabadnik might hear that. A regular Chabadnik might take that quite literally. Yeah, you're going to rule over Efrat until the coming of the Redeemer, because the Redeemer is already here.
Here.
Okay? In other words, you can take it in two possible ways, and Rabbi Riskin took it in the lighter way, in the way with less danger in it, let's say. He also says here that the Rebbe told him, you have to do something. What do you have to do? This is the thing that I found to be most meaningful. He told him, you need to raise Chabadniks who are modern on the outside and Chabad on the inside. Right? You have the Chabadniks who are Chabad on the outside, and presumably, of course, on the inside as well. They wear the uniform, they speak the lingo, they follow all the rules and customs, and they're part of the army. But he asked Rabbi Riskin to make a different kind of Chabad messenger, somebody who's modern on the outside, somebody who doesn't necessarily think like a Chabad Chassid, who doesn't certainly dress like a Chabad Chassid, act like a Chabad Chassid, and yet there's some Chabad on the inside. The way I take that personally is that it's the sense of a mission that you leave no Jew behind. And he talked a little bit for a couple seconds about igniting souls. I think what it means is that you have so many millions of Jews for whom they've lost their inheritance. This inheritance should be theirs, not necessarily theirs because they have to be Chabadniks, but it should be theirs to do what they please with. They should know of it, and they should understand it, and they should imbibe it. And this is, there's so many millions in the world who inherit whatever the general culture is, but don't inherit their Jewish inheritance. And that's the way I personally take a Chabad on the inside, that you want to give this inheritance to whoever is, whoever didn't receive it and might want to. And then in the end, last but not least, okay, he says, Yehi Zichro Baruch, meaning he refers respectfully to the Rebbe as someone who has passed away. And we'll see, of course, that even that is not something which is so obvious. It's not obvious. Let's go back to the page now. Okay. Okay. We need to talk a little bit. We won't do too much detail, but we need to talk a little bit about the lifetime of the Rebbe. The Rebbe was born in 1902 and lived in various places in Russia. When he was a young man, he was encouraged. He was encouraged to like sit in at a Russian university and hear courses. He was very interested in science. He was engaged to the daughter of the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, and eventually he married her. And they went first of all to Germany, okay, and wherever he went, he would take college courses, and eventually he even did a degree. He got himself a degree in engineering. The common saying among Chabad Hasidim is that he studied engineering at the Sorbonne or got a diploma at the Sorbonne. That's actually not the case, but he did get a degree. And he also did sit in on courses at the Sorbonne. After Germany, they went to France, and they were in Paris. And in fact, it's from Paris that he fled to the United States in 1941, when the Nazis. He fled France out of fear of the Nazis, and came to the United States with his wife in 1941. In his early years in the United States, apparently during World War II, he even worked as an engineer on ships, apparently something military. Although for the most part, he was working in Chabad institutions. His father-in-law, who had already come to the United States, employed him to work in various Chabad institutions that already existed. One of them was the Chabad publishing house, Kehot Publishing House. He ran that. He ran some other things. And he worked for a little while on the side as an engineer, but eventually he began to work solely within the realm of Chabad. We're going to see some text that where he talks about secular studies, or I just did something wrong. He didn't believe that secular studies existed, but what most people would call secular studies, he talks about them. And he had a special affinity for the hard sciences, less so perhaps for other things. And that's something that we'll get to tonight. In 1951, he was appointed the successor to his father-in-law. The widow of the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe actually wanted to appoint someone else, the husband of her first daughter. This Rebbe married the second daughter. His name was Rabbi Gur Ari, and there was apparently a bit of friction in the beginning, but eventually this Rabbi Gur Ari became a fervent follower of the seventh Rebbe of Lubavitch, and there was no what's the word? There was no split or civil war within the movement, nothing like that. In 1951, he becomes the Rebbe. He tried to avoid it. For a little while. He always saw himself as either the representative or almost the the word I'm looking for is substitute, like a substitute teacher almost, right? Just filling the place of filling the position of the sixth Rebbe of Lubavitch. He would often talk about the sixth Rebbe of Lubavitch who had passed away as the Nasi Hador, right? The leader of the generation. And if it came to him, he was just like a shadow or a reflection or a substitute teacher, once again, for the Nasi Hador. Often when he used that phrase, he was talking about his father-in-law. He lived his entire life after 1941 in New York. The only times he ever left New York when he was younger was to visit Chabad summer camps in the Catskills. That was it. And then even that stopped. And for most of his lifetime, he only stayed within the city of New York. He didn't leave the city of New York. And it's kind of amazing to think about that someone who was not only worldly, but who had his hands on people, right, directing people all around the globe, that he himself never left the confines of the city that he lived in. He also never visited Israel, which is also a topic of discussion among Chabad Hasidim and among people who talk about Chabad Hasidim. Why didn't the Rebbe ever visit Israel? At the same time, we already saw this last week, that he was extremely supportive of the state of Israel. He did not see this. He did not see the state of Israel in a magical way. Okay, neither of the extremes that we talked about last week. He didn't see the state of Israel as a work of Satan. He didn't see the state of Israel as the redemption, but he did see the state of Israel as an act of kindness by God, a way to save Jewish lives, protect Jewish lives, build Jewish life. And he wanted to be involved in that, which is why Chabad, why he encouraged Chabad to grow in Israel, why there was established in Israel a Kfar Chabad, a Chabad village. And so he was very supportive of the state of Israel. And there were various public leaders who saw him as their guy. One of them was Zalman Shazar, the president of the state of Israel, and a very fine scholar. The Shazar Institute we have to this day. And Zalman Shazar, when he came as the president of Israel to New York, he went to visit the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Israeli diplomats criticized him for it. They said that it's not dignified for the president of a state to visit a rabbi. It should rather be the rabbi who comes to your hotel room and visits the president of the state. So his reply was that I didn't visit him as the president of the state of Israel. I visited him as a chassid, as a follower of a rebbe, and apparently that's permitted. In his later years, in the 1980s, very, very much, this messianic fervor grew around him, and yet he always said no. Okay, and if you read about it, there's collected examples of this. Okay, of his very clear responses time and again to people who openly said, "This is the Messiah," or "You are the Messiah." Stop writing it. Stop saying it. Stop recording it. Stop proclaiming it. Okay, he was very consistent in this until his later years. In his later years, when he was older, and especially after 1992, when he had a stroke and he was partially paralyzed, he stopped clearly opposing these declarations. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. And that became the fodder for a major debate within Chabad. because if you have people who think that this is the Messiah, and the Messiah is either opposing something or not opposing something, or especially if the Messiah changes his approach. He used to oppose it clearly, and now he doesn't oppose it clearly anymore. What does that mean? Okay, and that's something that we'll talk about more. We'll talk about more as we go on, and we see some texts. Okay, after 1992, it got even more serious, because they would literally dance around him. Okay, they would literally dance around him, singing, right? You've all heard the song, I think, right? Yechi Adonenu, Morenu Verabenu. Probably most of you have heard this. Okay, long live our Lord and Master and Rabbi, the King Messiah, forever. They would do this around him, and he couldn't speak after the stroke, but he apparently with his hand would go like this, yeah, like egging them on and urging them to continue. And this was interpreted by many of them as clear encouragement. But when you have a person who's had a stroke and is paralyzed, partially paralyzed, and can't speak, it may not be so clear exactly what the person means, or if the person is reacting to what's going on around in a clear and understood fashion. And we all know what happened afterwards. Okay, he passed away in 1994 in the summer on the Hebrew date of Gimel Tammuz, which is a date which for Chabad Hasidim is a horrible thing. If you don't want to say that he died, then you say histalkuto, or you say that he disappeared, or that we can no longer see him, or that he's no longer walking around with us.
But we can have his faxes from his grave.
Ah, yes. Okay. There's a fax machine there. All kinds of stuff. One thing that I needed to say just a moment ago, that song, Yechi Adonenu Morenu Verabenu, that song, does it remind any of you of something very specific that we learned?
That's the same kind of thing that was said about Shabtai Tzvi.
Yeah, Shabtai Tzvi and then Jacob Emden had almost exactly the same song sung to them. Okay, it's different. It's different not because of the words, because the words are almost identical, but it's different because Shabtai Tzvi and Yaakov Emden, excuse me, Yaakov Frank, okay, they proclaimed it. They urged it openly, clearly. I'm the Messiah, okay? And here you have it being done for someone who never clearly, openly said so. And it makes it very, very different, once again, from all of the Messianic movements that we discussed.
But it makes it, to his Hasidim, it makes it even more so. Because apparently, if you declare yourself the Messiah, you cannot be the Messiah. So, if you don't declare yourself, but you don't oppose your group when they say that you are a Messiah, then in fact, there is much more proof for everybody else to say, yes, this is the Messiah, because he's not protesting.
Yeah, the Messiah needs to be modest too, right? Not proclaim himself the Messiah. So it's an added indication. Okay.
I have a question. How difficult was it? I understood it was very difficult for him to communicate at this point. Yes. So it might just have been too difficult too much effort for him to keep denying what he'd already been denying for years. And he kind of just went, oh, I haven't got the energy for this. They're going to carry on anyway.
It could be.
I have a different question. Is it
Yeah.
required for the Messiah to actually know that he is the Messiah, or only that we all think he is?
Good question. And I don't know if there's a clear answer to that either.
Well, there is what the Rambam says about the Messiah, about the Rambam has clear signs of who is a false Messiah and who is a real Messiah. And in those, in the writing of the Rambam, it's very clear that the Messiah cannot proclaim himself. If a person proclaims himself as a Messiah, he is a false Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Question,
And-
Avi. I wasn't here for the Jesus part, but did Jesus ever claim himself to be a Messiah?
We
I
don't
didn't
know.
think so. Yeah.
We don't know what the historical Jesus proclaimed or didn't proclaim. What's relevant is what the New Testament says about him.
Yeah.
Right. Or how the New Testament portrays him, and the New Testament portrays him as the Messiah.
Mm-hmm. So then there is a similarity to these two cases.
How come?
If we have no record that Jesus said that he was the Messiah, and the Gospels recorded just about everything Jesus said,
Then
it seems that there's a similarity. Is that the disciples proclaimed him the Messiah, and not Jesus himself.
Look,
From my recollection of the Gospels, he never said, I am the Messiah. But when somebody said, tell me, are you the Messiah? And he said, well, that's what you say.
mm-hmm.
That sounds like the Rebbe in his later years.
Well, it also has him condemning those who reject the Messiah. Mm-hmm. Okay, or condemning those who. Okay, perhaps. The difference, I think, Richard, is that it's 2,000 years. We can't possibly know anything about the historical Jesus. The only thing we have is the New Testament, which is later and has an agenda. But for this person, we're talking about the 20th century. We're talking about mass media. We're talking about everything is recorded and everything is archived. And that this is one of the people in the world who was most recorded and most archived and most followed, right? We know practically everything in almost every moment. And yet in his prime, he always rejected it. So, but I think making the comparison is an important thing. Okay.
Are we going to get to the point where we find out why they think he's a Messiah, or why he's considered Messiah, besides the fact that
let's talk about what he did, and maybe that will help us understand why one might think that he is the Messiah. I was surprised to find, I didn't know that this essay existed until recently. I was surprised to find that there's on a Chabad website, there's an article by Aviezer Ravitsky, the same Aviezer Ravitsky of the past couple of classes. And the same Aviezer Ravitsky who wrote a chapter in his Messianism book about the Messianic fervor in Chabad, he wrote an essay about the positive things that make contemporary Chabad unique. And I think his 4 points, even though he's writing them not about the Rebbe, he's writing them about the Chabad Hasidim in the wake of the Rebbe's death. But his 4 points really sum up what was unique about this man, because the same 4 points are what is unique about the movement that he fostered. The first thing he says about contemporary Chabad is that it has a welcoming face, right? Wherever you go, Chabad will greet you. Wherever Jews are, Chabad will be there for them. And all the jokes about, how do you know there's no life on Mars? There's no Chabad house on Mars. Okay? Chabad makes an effort to go and be there and to welcome and to take in. And Chabad will take you in without being judgmental and without asking how religious you are and without asking, do you keep that or don't you keep that? And you need to keep this and you don't keep that. Chabad just takes you as you are and accepts you as you are. The Rebbe apparently was a person very much like that. The Rebbe was able to relate to all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds, and they always felt like they were talking to someone who understood them. So that's one thing that makes Chabad unique and positive. And I should add that according to Ravitsky, these 4 features are the features that will make Chabad continue to succeed in the absence of the Rebbe. Number 2 is halachic integrity. Halachic integrity is extremely important for reasons that we're going to discuss very, very shortly. And halachic integrity is not muvan me'elav. It's not self-understood. The Hasidic movement in general was accused at its founding of being unhalachic, okay, of being antinomian. The Hasidim would do things that contradict the rules or contradict the tradition. Many Messianic movements, as we've seen, were antinomian. The stars, of course, are Shabtai Tzvi and Yaakov Frank, right? These are not no halachic integrity. These are anti-halachic movements. These are trying to turn norms upon their head. And yet there were other movements too. For example, the Messiah in Yemen is described as somebody who's both an ignoramus and not so very pious. And that helps Maimonides, construct this condemnation that ultimately stabilizes Yemenite Jewry and crushes this Messianic movement and prevents it from causing harm. Another example, perhaps, is once again Jesus of Nazareth as he's described in the New Testament. Right? Despite the verse, that I haven't come to uproot anything in the law of Moses. And yet, how so? In that same passage, right? You have how, well, the Torah says one thing, but the true understanding of it is not the way Jews have understood it until now. It's rather the new way in which Jesus explains it. Okay? And so there you also have it. In Chabad, you have extraordinary halachic integrity. The Rebbe was an extraordinary Torah scholar. Not only did he study sciences when he was in Germany and when he was in France, there's also notebooks that he wrote full of analysis of halacha and custom and Hasidic thought. Okay, he never for a moment left the Torah, and he was an important Torah scholar in his time. Some would say an extraordinary Torah scholar in his time. Number 3 is universal preparation for redemption. That needs some explanation. What does that mean, universal preparation for redemption? It means, first of all, that redemption to come making the Messiah come or maybe reveal himself is not something for Jews alone. Okay? Think about it. Even wild figures like Shabtai Tzvi and Yaakov Frank, even for them, the ideology was that the redemption was, well, not only was mostly for Jews, but that it was Jews who needed to make it happen. Even the extreme antinomian behaviors, these were behaviors by Jews. When Shabtai Tzvi went to a place, it was the Jews who welcomed him as the Messiah. Shabtai Tzvi didn't have like an agenda for the Gentiles, for the other nations of the world. The Rebbe of Lubavitch did. Okay, he had an agenda for the nations of the world, and that agenda comes out in various ways. First of all, there was a campaign, and the campaign itself brings up a really interesting question in Jewish thought. In Jewish thought, you have the idea that people are capable of relationships. In biblical thought, that they're capable of relationships with each other and also with God. In human relationships, you have choice, right? You choose someone, you marry someone, for instance, okay? You choose among people. So too does the God of the Bible choose among the peoples. He chooses Israel, right? He could have chosen, perhaps in Jewish thought, someone else, but he chose Israel. So what about everybody else? Okay, so for everybody else in classical Jewish thought, in rabbinic thought, you have the idea of the 7 commandments of the sons of Noah. Noah survives the flood, so all of humanity is descended from Noah. The sons of Noah is a synonym, a rabbinic synonym for humanity. The 7 laws for all humanity. This idea always existed in Jewish thought. Always, at least for the past 2,000 years. Okay? It begs the question whether the Jews should do something about this. You know, if Jews are obligated to keep the commandments, and if Jews are obligated for other Jews to keep the commandments, they're arevim ze bazeh, they have responsibility for one another, and like the whole ship floats or sinks together, then do Jews have the obligation to get non-Jews to follow their commandments? That's a possibility which is implied in the very idea of the, possibly implied in the very idea of the 7 laws of the sons of Noah. And yet we don't see Jews who act upon this until the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe starts a worldwide campaign, translated into all kinds of different languages, for non-Jews to follow the 7 laws of the sons of Noah. It's a Jewish responsibility to get non-Jews to do this. He also passes some kind of resolution through the Congress about this, the United States Congress. Elisheva.
You're saying that makes me think of what it says in the Aleinu about it's not just us who will come to recognize God, but everybody.
Okay, so it fits. In order to make that happen, Elisheva, maybe everybody needs to be involved, not just Jews.
Exactly.
Okay, and so, you know, it's not your like California kind of tikkun olam. It's a lot more conservative with a lower C. And yet at the same time, it's very radical, okay? Jews have a responsibility, not just for how non-Jews act, but it's more acute than that. Jews have a responsibility to get non-Jews to act in a way that will bring the Messiah. Okay. Other examples of that were the moment of silence. A long time ago, before the United States became what it is today, there was prayer in public schools. And then the Supreme Court ended that. No more prayer in public schools, the separation of church and state. Then there was the idea of having a non-denominational spiritual minute. Okay, in American public schools, you'd have a moment of silence, a minute of silence in public schools. This was the way that the American traditionalists wanted to preserve at least a little bit of, I guess what they see as spirituality in American public schools. Now you can think what you want about that. You can be for it or oppose it, but think what it means that the Lubavitcher Rebbe had a campaign for this. Okay, think about it. His Hasidim are not going to public schools. He's not trying to get Jews to go to public schools. He's not even doing this, for the most part, for those Jews who do send their kids to public schools. He's doing this for 200 or 300 million Americans, okay, part to public schools, that there should at least be a minute a day in their education where they have, which is devoted to the possibility, perhaps, of thinking about God. Okay, this is a degree of responsibility for the non-Jewish majority around you in the diaspora that we rarely, if ever, see at all, right? Before the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Okay, it's very atypical. This also brings up the idea of Hasidut, of the Hasidic movement. The connection is that most Hasidic movements by the 20th century were highly insular movements. Okay, you keep the spiritual fervor of the Hasidic movement going by how do you say lehistager in English? By isolating yourself, by keeping away from general society. Okay, and the Rebbe didn't see that as Hasidut at all. The Rebbe saw Hasidut as something which has to touch all Jews and which has to touch all human beings, not just Jews. And it's the opposite attitude of compared to every single other Hasidic group that existed that existed in the 20th century. Okay, maybe with a slight exception of Breslov later on, but even in the 1980s, Breslov still wasn't very popular. And this also gets to the how should we say it? I hope sympathetic listeners will forgive me, but the imperialism of Chabad thought. What do I mean by the imperialism of Chabad thought? When a Chabad Chassid says Chasidus, Hasidic movement, he means Chabad. What does that mean? We usually think today of Hasidic movements. You have Gerer Hasidim, you have Vishnitz Hasidim, you have Satmar Hasidim, and you have Chabad Hasidim. Chabad Hasidim are one kind of Hasidim among many, right? One group among many groups. And even the Hasidim themselves, most of them have no trouble with this. The Gerer Hasidim know that there's also Vishnitz Hasidim. And the Vishnitz Hasidim know that there's also Gerer Hasidim. But the Chabad Hasidim don't. That's the imperialism. There is no Hasidut besides Chabad. Chabad equals Hasidut. Hasidut equals Chabad. And there is nothing else. If you have a person who is a real Chassid in his heart, and thinks that doesn't think that he's a Chabad chassid, it's only because he hasn't figured it out yet. And
Avi, can I ask a question?
yeah.
I want to go back, if I may, to the previous point about basically the outreach to the non-Jewish community. How much was that an innovation of the seventh Rebbe, or was that always a strain within Chabad?
I don't know enough to give you an absolute no. The best I can tell you is that to the best of my knowledge, it was his. I don't recall it being previous to that. It may be that there are seeds of the idea in earlier Chabad Hasidut, like Chana brought up originally. I don't think he did anything that didn't have some kind of like initial spark or initial seed or like an idea that's incubating earlier. But in practice, I don't recall that it happened before him.
So yeah, okay, thank you. That answers my question.
I have a rather basic kind of a question. How do Chabadniks, what is their definition of Hasidism in that case?
That's number 4. Okay. Wait a second for number 4. I think the imperialism is important. Why? Well, let me just finish the idea of the imperialism. Every chassid, even if he doesn't know it, is a Chabad chassid. Now expand that a bit more. Every Jew, even if he or she doesn't know it, is really a Chabad chassid deep inside. Just got to find the spark and ignite. Okay. And Chabad thought stresses a huge a dichotomy or a huge chasm between Jews and non-Jews. Okay, and yet you have to reach every single Jew, and every single Jew needs the redemption to come and has to act for the redemption to come. And now you even include the non-Jews, okay? The redemption is for them too, and they have a role, they play a role in making it happen, okay? Now, what is Hasidut? Maybe an answer is in this 4th point that Avi Ravitsky made, okay? Represented and that his movement represented, it's this. It's that divinity fills all. It's everywhere, okay? And that makes redemption natural. Think about it. In any realm of life, in any human being, in any place, at any time, there is God. Okay? God can be found everywhere if you know how to look for him. And if that's the case, think about what it means. Redemption should be obvious. Redemption should be happening. The unnatural state of the world is not to be redeemed. God is everywhere. Everything is divine. So why isn't the redemption here? The simple thing would be that a divine world is a redeemed world. And yet we have a divine world which is not yet redeemed, and that is strange. That contravenes nature. That goes against the way things ought to be. And if that's the case, then we can take it one step further. It should be really easy to bring the redemption. It's just like bringing things to be in their natural state where they should be. It's not like you have to have a catastrophe and turn the world upside down so that this dynamic world or this secular world or this unholy world become holy. It's the opposite. It already is holy. And if it already is holy, then it should be like a snap of the fingers, and the redemption is already here. Okay? Before we leave Aviezer Ravitsky,
not
just
so
one
simple.
What?
It's not so simple.
It's not
because
such a there
the
is
idea
sin,
is
but it's
the
not
idea
such a
is if
simple-
everything is so holy,
Yeah,
then we are the ones who really make it unholy.
yeah,
That our actions are ones that make it unholy. And therefore, we have to change our actions.
okay.
And in order to change our actions in Chabad's thinking, Chabad's way,
Yeah,
it means to pick up their way, because not only are they the only Hasidim,
yeah,
but they are only ones who are naturally in the redeemed world. So they are already there, and they are already going with the natural world of redemption.
okay.
The only problem is that everybody else is not yet is working against it. So they have to, in fact, turn you and me and Elisheva and Carolyn and who else, whatever, to act the way they say is the natural way, so that everything is going to be actually redeemed. And that is the danger of this Messianic movement.
I don't have the same impression completely. Okay, meaning there is I feel it in my gut, the deep imperialism of Chabad thought, and I do think that it has its real problems. It's related to the thing I said earlier about how Chabad is like an army, right? And thinking and acting a certain way. And yet I never got the sense from Chabad people or from Chabad writings that we're also sinful. Okay?
We're not all sinful. We're all on the way. We are on different madrigot. But theirs, we never have actually reached their high madriga.
I hear what you're saying.
Therefore, if we don't climb, if we don't dance to the music of their orchestra, we will never climb to the top, and we will be the ones who are stopping the Messiah from actually being there. Because if we are not there, if we're not everybody there with them, then the world is never going to reach its natural, redemption universe thing.
Hannah, I really hear what you're saying. I'm just going to say that it's not my impression. You talk about like ranking, madrigot, levels, who's on the highest level and who's on a lower level. I understand exactly what you're saying, but I honestly never felt that from Chabad or found that.
Can I pipe in? Can I pipe in and say something? Can I pipe in?
Yeah, go ahead.
We're going to be doing a class on Jewish and Hebrew on democracy and totalitarianism or authoritarianism, and maybe we should dedicate a class to Jewish fascism or something like that. This sounds like it sounds just like it sounds. It's just like any other ideology that is a totalitarian ideology. And the way you described their tanks and their uniforms and their, and everything that goes along with this this movement, with all the great intentions that they have, if they haven't really reached political power, that's the that's the logical end to it. I mean, it's if you don't, it's our way or the highway. There's no room for pluralism. There's no room for dialogue among equals. It's here it is, take it or leave it.
It's not true.
But usually it's not take it or leave it, or it's not levels. It's more like the way it's presented is every single good thing that you do can bring the Messiah.
Okay, well, that's a fine ideology, but to say that they're only the way is problematic from my standpoint.
Can I just say something?
I think we're agreeing that it's problematic. We're just not agreeing on exactly where the problem is. But okay. That's okay.
My experience with Chabad in Winnipeg was, with one exception, overwhelmingly positive. And this was especially so surrounding my divorce. The halachic acceptable gittin are not available in Winnipeg. So I had to have a ceremony with a shaliach from the Toronto Bet Din. And the Rabbi Altan, who was the Chabad rabbi there, was absolutely wonderful with me. He said to me at the pre-meeting, there's going to be a lot of men there, come along with some girlfriends. And every step of the way, he made it painless, and he was supportive. Now, obviously, he's not happy that somebody's getting divorced, but he was absolutely wonderful. And then later, when I got a juk in my head that I wanted to, for the second time in my life, go to the mikveh after my divorce, I went to the Chabad mikveh, and it was really the positive experience that I had hoped it would be. I had only good experiences.
Okay.
Now, our experiences with Chabad were also only good. I mean, when my wife was living in the States for 8 years, she became attracted to Chabad, and that's where she'd go to daven. And she found it very non-judgmental. I mean, almost to the extreme that Rav Mendel went to extreme lengths within the halachic framework to accommodate people that were not halachically observant.
Yeah.
I mean, there were one of Barbara's close friends who's a very liberal Jew. She's involved in the Jewish renewal movement, but she would go there every week religiously to daven, and she would argue with Rav Mendel on halachic points. And every answer that Mendel gave her was with complete respect. He never put her down. He never put my wife down. He never put anybody who came up with points. He was very positive to a congregation that was about as diverse as you can get. The funny thing is that the Chabad house is located next to the big money conservative shul in Cherry Hill. And the conservative shul there, TBS, was very halachically observant. It was conservadox, as we used to call it in those days. And they closed their parking lot. on Shabbat. And next door is Chabad. And where did they start parking? They started parking. Chabad would not close their parking lot. They say, I don't care how you get here. What's important is you get here. I make no judgments. The Chabad parking lot was filled with the people going to Chabad and the people going to TBS next door. And eventually, people from TBS, Temple Beth Shalom, TBS, they gradually began to drift over to Chabad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these were people who were halachically observant.
Yeah.
And the experience in the Chabad shul was so informal and so not judgmental. I mean, people came to shul in jeans, people came to shul in ties and jackets. The Israelis in Cherry Hill, and there are quite a few of them, all went to Chabad because it was real to them. And it was accepting to them, and they show up in t-shirts and jeans into shul. The secular Israelis.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's our experience with Chabad.
My experience is that they buy you a little at a time. So you come into this welcoming face. And then after it's a time, well, maybe you really should think about finding a way to take this holiday off. They're not going to tell you you can't make a living. But if there's some way, that you can be there for services and not go to work on that day, that'd be better. And maybe if you could wear a sleeve that comes down below your elbow instead of up here, and then that goes too. And to think about what you're eating. They change you a little at a time after they've brought you into the fold with all the welcoming. When my daughter was alone in Canada, they embraced her. And she found this very reassuring at a time when she was feeling very alone, because the conservative shuls, you have to go repeatedly and participate a lot and volunteer for things, and then they start to recognize that you're a new human being in the environment, whereas Chabad comes to you. So she never had a Shabbat alone. She was at this table or at that table and had all these friends among Chabad. That when I got there, I went nuts from their so-called lectures and their understanding of what was the broad community. I just heard this stuff. I said, what? But it was very, very enthralling for her. And for a long time, I worried that she was going to go for a shidduch.
I also had a very positive experience with Chabad in the States, but I'm not going to take the time to talk about it. I think we've had too much time on this subject already, except the only comment I say is that Chabad in the States is a lot different from Chabad here.
That's true.
Okay.
Very much.
All of that is important. I think we sense here that there's people who have serious disagreements with Chabad and see it as something dangerous, and that there's reasons for that. We also have people here who have had extremely good experiences, and so much so that they want to express them.
I'm not saying that I did not have positive experiences with Chabad. I have no problem. I have no problem with Chabad people as people. Right. I have problems with the ideology. Okay. I have problems with the Chabad as a movement.
Okay. Chana, in terms of the ideology, I just want to point out with number 4 here, divinity fills all, which makes redemption natural. It does not have to be taken in the way that you say. And my sense is that it isn't. meaning that, okay, redemption is natural, so whose sin is it that's preventing it? Or redemption is natural and it's the people on top of the, who are making it come and the people on the bottom who are stopping it. That kind of a judgment is not something that fits into divinity fills all. It's the opposite. Divinity fills all, you just got to find it. And that's that Ravitsky is suggesting that. Ravitsky understands he writes about it. The
They found it. You haven't found it yet, and they found it.
What? What?
I just argue with you. Yes, you have to find it. Everyone has to find it, except everyone has to find it. They have found it already.
Well, they have found it already in terms of that Chabad does inherit the Jewish tradition, right? And does think that there's lots of Jews who haven't discovered the Jewish tradition. And I don't know, to me, that isn't something that's so scary. What's scary are different things to me, right? The idea that you can't even comprehend of a Jew who isn't really a Chabadnik, right? You can't even comprehend of a kind of Jewish thought that doesn't agree with what the Rebbe presented. Those are the things that personally bother me, okay? But it's an imperialism that's more theoretical. It's not an imperialism that you find as much, at least, in practice.
Are there any places in which Chabad is in control of a town or?
Absolutely. If I can be cynical for a moment, because you've heard me be so positive until now, balance that off too. If I can be cynical for a moment, Chabad tends to be much more friendly and much less judgmental when they don't run the show. Okay. Yep. Right now I'm living in Kiryat Motzkin, which has the city rabbi is a Chabadnik. So Chabad,
which city?
Controls all the Kiryat Motzkin. Okay. So Chabad controls things, and it's hard to say that the rabbi of the city here strives to speak in a way that that brings Jews closer to him. All right. And so in Russia, for instance, in Russia, practically every Jewish community in Russia today, or even in most of Eastern Europe, is run by Chabad. It doesn't mean that it's bad, okay? And it doesn't mean that what I described just now happens in all of them. It certainly does not. But in some cases, it does. We need to get to the big thing, and that is this book by Rabbi Dr. David Berger, who I told you at the beginning of the course, when I was an undergraduate, I took a course with him in Messianism. And that was before the Rebbe died. After the Rebbe died, he went on a crusade, Rabbi Dr. David Berger, and the crusade was eliminated by number 2. Okay, I'll explain what I mean. He wrote a book, which you see here, the title says it all, The Rebbe, the Messiah, and the Scandal of Orthodox Indifference. He's a teacher at Yeshiva University. Orthodox indifference to what? What do you think?
To his Messiah, to his being the Messiah, to the Messianic sayings of him.
Heresy. It is heresy to say that a man who died is going to come back again and be the Messiah. How does Rabbi Dr. David Berger know this? Because he's an extraordinary scholar of Jews in the Middle Ages, and he knows the classic debates, and he's a scholar of the classic debates between Jews and Christians. And what, until 1994, even in Chabad, was a wall-to-wall Jewish consensus. The consensus was that the Messiah is living and not dead. Right? That's what Maimonides said. If the man dies and hasn't completed the mission, then you know that he wasn't the Messiah. There is no second rising. There is no second rising, no second coming of Jesus. Okay? The evangelicals in the United States understood this very well. And that's why they made bumper stickers that said Chabad, right idea, wrong guy. Okay? Chabad flipped on its head. Until 1994, what did they say about this? They said the Rebbe cannot die. The Rebbe will not die. Why not? Because he's the Messiah and he hasn't yet completed his mission, right? And the Messiah will complete his mission in his lifetime. Boom, 1994 comes, summer, Gimel Tammuz. Then what do the Hasidim say? Immediate about face. They say he's going to come back.
He's gonna pull a Jesus and come back.
You said
I think we just have to thank our lucky stars that there isn't a world imperial empire like there was 2,000 years ago, or we'd be suffering the consequences again in another few hundred years.
But
all right.
The one point that I wanted to make about this pull of Jesus thing is that Chabad is very split on this. The American Chabad movement, from what I've been reading and the little bit I've seen with my own eyes, is not in with the Messianic wing. They tend to, the old guard in Chabad tends to poo-poo this.
Richard, I don't want to take too much time on this. Hold off, please. It may not be as simple as it looks. Let's understand why it may not be as simple as it looks. We have here again, the Rebbe, the Messiah, and the scandal of Orthodox indifference. What did Rabbi Dr. David Berger want? Rabbi Dr. David Berger said, look, Orthodox Jews believe in the 13 principles of Maimonides. I don't know if that's really true, okay, but that's what he posits. Okay, my teacher, Professor Menachem Kellner, wrote a rebuttal to Rabbi Dr. David Berger on that point. We're not going to get into that now. Orthodox Jews, we'll just assume for the moment, are Jews who accept the 13 principles of Maimonides. Number 12 is the coming of the Messiah, and Maimonides very clearly says that the Messiah completes his mission in his lifetime and does not die before he completes it and then come back. If that is the case, then we now have a movement of Jews who are traditional, who keep halakha, who observe the mitzvot, and yet they reject something that's been part of Jewish dogma for over 1,000 years, okay? That was central to Jews remaining Jews and standing firm against Christianity, right? What Richard said earlier about pulling a Jesus, okay? Rabbi Dr. David Berger said to the Orthodox Jewish community in mostly North America, because he said it in English, later was translated into Hebrew. He said, you need to be consistent and you need to be firm and you need to be principled. There needs to be a like with Reform, okay? You do not accept Reform Jews as traditional Jews. You do not, maybe you have good relations, say, with a Reform rabbi, okay? But you will not send your children to a Reform school. Why? Because it teaches something that you disagree with in principle, because Reform does not accept the 13 principles of Maimonides. So you need to keep the same principles, said Rabbi Berger, for Chabad. What needs to be done? What needs to be done is that you do not walk into a Chabad house unless the Chabad rabbi openly and clearly says that the Rebbe is not the Mashiach because the Rebbe died. Okay? And if a heretic slaughters an animal, can you eat it? No. You have Orthodox Jews slaughtering meat for the OU. Chabadniks can no longer be accepted as shochtim, to slaughter animals for meat. Why? Because the slaughtered animal of a heretic is not kosher. Okay? Unless a Chabad shochet is willing to say clearly and openly that I thought the Rebbe would be the Mashiach, but since he died, I know that he's not. If the Chabad shochet can't say that, then you cannot eat his meat. If in the Chabad house they dance around singing Yechi Adonenu Morenu V'Rabbeinu, you can't go to that Chabad house, and you can't include those Chabadniks in a minyan. Okay, this is what Rabbi Berger presented to the Orthodox community as a matter of principle. Okay, if you are principled, then this is what you need to do. If you're serious about these essential beliefs of the Jewish faith, Maimonides principles, then this is what you need to do. You're principled when it comes to reform, you're principled when it comes to JTS, then why can't you be principled towards Chabad? Okay, that is what he put forward in his book. And his book, it's pretty clear, I think, to everybody here. His book was a complete failure, not as a book, but as a campaign. Okay, the book is actually a really interesting book, but as a campaign, the campaign failed. Why did the campaign fail? I'm asking all of you now.
Just because of what was said here before. They're nice people. They are welcoming. They are wonderful. They are accepting everybody. So what if they call their person who died Messiah? Okay, we'll live with that.
Okay, I hear what you're saying.
Wolves in Orthodox clothing is what I would call it.
Wolves
Because they are so much adherent to halakha and kashrut and every little detail. It's very difficult to just, on the basis of this, what I would call one fantasy, to not see them as observant religious Jews.
Nice. I'm going to compare what Jennifer said to what Chana said. Let's say you want American Jews not to walk into Chabad houses because Chabad houses are places of heresy. You're not going to succeed, Chana very correctly said, with the average American Jew. If he wants to go to a Chabad house, what does he care what they write on their yarmulkes, that the Rebbe is a Mashiach? What difference does it make to him? But you have to remember that orthodoxy in North America is not orthodoxy in Eastern Europe. It's not controlled by Chabad. Okay? Orthodox Jews in North America are aware of this stuff, and they're not dependent on the Chabad house. A lot of them are cynical about Chabad or dismissive of Chabad, and yet they're not going to stop buying Chabad chickens. Could they stop buying Chabad chickens? They could. Could they set up a day school alternative to the Chabad day school? They could. And in many places they do it. Okay? They could listen to David Berger, but they didn't. And so I think the reason, personally, I go more in Jennifer's direction. The welcoming face and all of that is important, but the real thing here is halachic integrity. This is not Shabtai Tzvi or Yaakov Frank. This is something which, even though David Berger says it's easy to measure, it's still not so easy to see. This person, if you'll excuse the phrase, looks from. This person acts from. This person believes in God. This person sacrifices in order to keep the commandments, right? And because he won't give you a declaration, you know, I used to think the Rebbe was the Mashiach, but I don't anymore since he died. Since he won't make this confession to you, you're going to kick him out of the community? You're going to fire him as a shochet? Okay, are we going to be like, you know, like the Catholic Church? We're going to have like, a commitment to the, what is it? To the, the declaration of the official dogma. Okay, we won't let Chabad kids into our school unless their parents declare this. Okay, these are religious people. And it's not just the halachic integrity, because halachic integrity is a technical thing ultimately. It's also, I guess, religious fervor and commitment, right? When Orthodox American Jews look at the typical American Jew, they don't see too much commitment, right? And when they look at a Chabadnik, whether they like Chabad or not, they see lots of commitment. And to tell this Orthodox Jew, you know, basically the Chabadnik is like an assimilated American Jew because they both don't agree with Maimonides' principles, it just doesn't work. My teacher's response to David Berger's book was, Menachem Kellner's response was, that you're wrong. It's not Maimonides' 13 principles that define traditional Judaism. Rather, it's a commitment to trying to do what the Torah says as you understand the Torah. So what if you misunderstand the Torah? What then? Okay, that's what it is. So if you misunderstand the Torah, there's three things you can say. Number one, you can say you're technically a heretic. Okay. Number two, you can say number one is you're technically a heretic, so I can't have anything to do with you. Number two is you're technically a heretic, but you made a mistake. Okay, you're sincere and you want to bring the Messiah and you want to follow your Rebbe and you think he said he was the Messiah. Okay, it's a mistake. And the third option, which many people said, I've seen it in the name of Rav Aaron Soloveitchik. That's the brother of the Rav Soloveitchik of Yeshiva University. He said that it's simply I'm looking for the right word, but I can't find it. It's simply I don't want to say it's a joke. It's like when a person believes something which is really stupid. Okay, you can say that this person, is wrong. You can say that this person didn't think too hard. You can say that this person made a big mistake, right? But a heretic, he says, this idea that the Rebbe will come back from the dead and redeem the world is just silly. It's not heresy. It's just silly. It's a silly thing said by people with broken hearts. Okay, I've also seen that Rav Yuval Sharlo has written this. You don't have to excommunicate Chabad. It's not heresy. It's just silly. Okay,
I do not advocate excommunicating them. On the contrary, they're very very good and everything. But I do not want to have to be forced to think like them and act like them. That's all.
Okay. But Berger's book is not about Chabad forcing anybody to do anything. Berger's book is about the Orthodox world taking a principled position and not letting in something which is heresy.
Well, I think it's a little bit. I think that is so extreme, and that's so so narrow thinking that it's obviously not going to work.
I take issue with this thing about halakhic integrity. You know, I went into the airport in Ben Gurion, and I went to the synagogue there, and they had some of the Chabadnik or the Chabadnik Sidurim there, and I not happen to have taken my own Sidur, and so I picked it up, and I was shocked. I mean, I was shocked.
What?
They had changed.
What'd you find?
They had changed some of the prayers, some of the basic prayers, with things about the Rebbe. They had put the Rebbe inside these prayers in a very prominent way. It wasn't like you're you know, I'm waiting for the Mashiach or waiting for the Rebbe. You know, it was it's Avodah Zarah. It's how can you know, I think that maybe what this Berger was trying to say is that, you know, these are really not, they've gone over the line. They've gone past, they've gone out, you know, they might be observing all the laws, but in this very central tenet of Judaism, they have gone over the other side. They become Messianic. They're Messianic Jews without calling Jesus the Messiah. And that's, in that sense, you know, I don't think they're within the pale. I mean, we could, you know, there's plenty of Orthodox who consider conservative Jews or Reform Jews beyond the pale. These guys are really beyond the pale. They're farther out than the Reform, as far as I'm concerned. They're no longer within the consensus of Judaism, in the sense that that we're waiting for the Messiah, that we don't know what the Messiah looks like, if he's even a person. And here they're coming and they're saying, okay, this is the guy we're praying to. They're praying to him.
So Berger, to a large degree, agrees with you. And you brought up something which is very important to say, and which is also emphasized in Berger's book. It's not just, like Richard said, doing a Jesus, okay? You also have in Chabad, and you had it very powerfully in earlier years. I don't know how much it is today. Maybe for the sitter you found, maybe it still is very powerful. You have the idea that the Rebbe is somehow identical to God. In other words, the Chabad Messianism may not just be heresy, it may even be idolatry.
Yes.
Okay, certainly the placement of the Rebbe's beady-eyed photograph at the head of every dining room table in homes and in restaurants and in everywhere you turn around certainly smacks of idolatry to me. Don't they remember about graven images?
Yeah.
They think about the Baba Sali too.
Excuse my sarcasm, but I know somebody, this was way back, this was when the Rebbe was alive, who used to say that it's like George Orwell's 1984. For Chabadniks, Big Brother is always watching you.
There's a shawarma place up here that you cannot eat without the Rebbe's eyes following you. Absolutely is exactly that.
All right. So you have the possible idolatry. You have the idea that it's not idolatry, but maybe it's heresy, that the Rebbe is doing that the Hasidim are doing a Jesus. I like that, Richard. And then you had that phrase, and then you have the idea of the moderate Chabad Hasidim who really hoped and thought that the Rebbe was the Mashiach. And then when he died, they realized that they were wrong. Okay? What actually are the numbers? Okay? And this is why Richard said earlier how he doesn't think that the Messianic stuff is so prevalent in American Chabad as it is in Israeli Chabad. I think there is a gap. I mean, it is more prominent in Israeli Chabad. And yet, even in American Chabad, how many Chabadniks would be willing to make Berger's declaration? To say that I think the Rebbe in his lifetime was a worthy candidate to be the Messiah. I thought he would be the Messiah. And now it's very disappointing. I know that I was wrong because he died.
None of them will say that.
What?
I don't think
What?
any of them will say that they were totally wrong.
Not true. There are some, okay?
Some.
And yet they're a
Okay.
very small minority. And
Yeah.
to a certain degree, they're a persecuted minority.
Exactly.
Right?
They
Because-
would be not,
Because
they would be kicked out from Chabad.
I don't think they
Well,
would be kicked out of
we-
Chabad. And yet it's a very hard thing for a Chabadnik to say.
Yep.
And what you have is you have two different extremes. You have a small minority to think that the Rebbe is not the Mashiach because he died. They thought he was, but then learned that he wasn't. You have maybe a somewhat larger majority at the other spectrum that identifies the Rebbe with God. And it's not heresy, it's rather idolatry. And then you have a large mainstream which thinks that the Rebbe was the candidate to be the Mashiach and was the Mashiach and is the Mashiach even though he has died. Okay?
Yep.
Either it only appears that he died or he died and he'll come back, and yet they do not think that this is a something that should be publicized, something which should be talked about. This is not good advertising for Chabad. This might keep Jews away from Judaism rather than bring them closer to Judaism. In other words, people who inwardly think this, but don't proclaim it. Okay, that seems to be that's what a lot of Berger's book is about. That seems to be the majority. In other words, even mainstream, supposedly non-Messianic Chabad that doesn't have Messiah posters everywhere, the Chabad rabbi in the place may still indeed think that the Rebbe is the Mashiach.
I know that Rav Mendy
Mhm.
said from the pulpit that
Mhm.
he did not believe, he does not and did not believe that the Rebbe was the Messiah.
Okay, that's
And he
that's
comes
very
from an
clear.
old time Chabad family that
Brooklyn.
from Brooklyn and from, his father was, right up there at the Rebbe's right hand.
His father wrote many
So
of
he and the
And
people.
by the way, his father wrote the Chabad Siddur. And I have a copy of it in my house, and it does not say anything about there's
You're talking about
no
the
commentary about the Rebbe in that Siddur.
absolutely.
Richard, you're talking about the English translation of the Chabad Siddur, right?
The Hebrew and the English. Rav Mendel the older did the translation,
Gotcha.
and he also
Okay.
revised the Hebrew in some
Okay.
cases. Some of the commentary. And
Revised is the right word because this is a siddur that is specifically for American Jews, which says not to offend. And what Don is talking about is the regular Chabad Siddurim who are everywhere in public places in Israel. So you've got to understand the differences.
yes, that's true.
Richard, I just wanted to say that Richard, it makes me feel good that he says that publicly. I've always really liked Rav Mendy, but I never knew that he publicly says that. I'm glad that he does, and that I hope more Chabad Hasidim will do that.
It's wonderful, but he's one in 100.
Mhm.
I think that all of these groups, I think that all of these groups tend to form splinter groups after time. You know, and you can see it in other religious groups as well. We used to call Unitarians in the States chicken Jews because they would talk about Jesus as being a great teacher, but not necessarily as being the unique Son of God and the Messiah in the same way that other Christians did. Jesus was recognized as a great teacher and you should follow his teachings, but not necessarily the whole Messiah. And so we've had little splinter groups of Jews all along, all throughout Jewish history, groups that form some unique idea based on one aspect of something they study intensively, and then they bring a group along with them. And the question is, how long does it endure?
Jennifer, a lot of people thought that would happen to Chabad when the Rebbe died. And what actually happened is that the movement has exploded, meaning disseminated in a huge way, much greater than when he was alive. And despite all of this, despite all the, you know, this ideological debate that we've been talking about tonight, the movement hasn't split.
You know, I don't know how much money they have, but they have a lot of money. I mean, to be able to support all these shlichim all over the world that clearly are not supporting themselves in any fashion.
No,
they have some kind of big money behind them. That there's a lot of money. I only wish that the Conservative movement had as much money as they do.
They are amazing fundraisers.
Well,
There was not in my community. There were Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox synagogues within a 1 mile radius, and the rich people in every single one of them donated to the Chabad that was also in that mile radius.
They're involved in a lot of community service work as well. What I saw in Canada when my daughter was there is they were running a clinic and treatment center for drug addicts, and it was non-denominational. They also had a non-denominational, obviously religious Chabad run child development center. But they were taking, you know, the general community into this. So they become acquainted with the general community through their good works. And then the donations start pouring in for that reason. So they're the nice Jews in a lot of places.
I remember reading that each Chabad Shaliach needs to become, and it needs to be independent financially, meaning that each Chabad house in each place is responsible for its own fundraising.
That's correct.
Okay. One more thing that was almost left out.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. It had to do with David Berger. Yes.
I have to leave now. I've got another Zoom gig in
Okay.
5 minutes. A question. There's obviously a lot more to go on this topic. Do we have enough money? Do we have enough money in the budget to have another session? Don? Can we get away with another session for this course?
Maybe, how about talking about that offline?
Pardon?
We've already put in our budget, our demand for payment. So
How about we use the time we have to talk about the topic?
How about, I don't think the rest of it needs to be recorded.
Okay.
Let's talk about this other stuff.
Okay, folks, I've got to bid you a fond adieu.
Bye-bye, Richard.
Bye-bye.
So do I.
One more thing that's important to point out is that just to have the story correct, is that I said that Rabbi Berger's book ultimately was not a success in terms of a campaign, but there was one thing that it resulted in, just one small thing, that the rabbinic organization called the Rabbinic Council of America, in the wake of his book, put out an official statement that a belief in a Messiah who returns from the dead is not does not fit traditional Jewish belief, and that it shouldn't be considered a possible Jewish belief. But other than a statement like that, it hasn't worked, and Chabad has continued to spread and spread and spread. I should also say, maybe this is a nice place to conclude, that this number 3 here, universal preparation for redemption, Chabad Hasidim, and other Hasidim, and all Jews, and even all human beings, everyone has to do their thing to prepare the way for the Messiah to come. That this is also the reason for Chabad's most famous song. Does anybody remember what Chabad's most famous song was before the Yechi business?
Mashiach, Mashiach, Mashiach.
Before that, before the Mashiach. There was Chabad before all the craziness started. Ufaratzta, 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 yama vakidma, tzafona vanigba. That's a Chabad tune. And it means that you will spread, right, to the four directions of the globe. Okay?
That was Karlebach. That was Karlebach song.
But it was a Chabad song. Chabad,
yes, it was Rabbi Karlebach, who was Chabad at the time.
Yeah.
Okay, bye everybody. Have to go.
Bye everybody.
So do I. Thank you, Avi. It was wonderful as usual, and all the best. And let's pray that 2021 is an improvement over the previous one.
Amen.
Amen.
Bye everybody.
Thank you, Avi.
Bye-bye. Toda rabah.
Bye.